the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Oh, I think they're doing a great job. A lot of them are.
Good afternoon, Dwayne. How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon, Radio Cayman Nation, and a happy Monday and a very happy November. Thank you for tuning into your station of the nation, Radio Cayman. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. We will be sitting down with our various mental health practitioners to discuss mental health matters, following this very brief disclaimer.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Live Communication.
Let your voice be heard.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. And again, a very happy November to all of our listeners out there in Radio Cayman Nation. We're pleased to have in studio Dr. Alexandra Bodden, along with Mr. Levon Bodden. Yes. I got it right. And Dr. Lizelle Angelova joining us by phone. Dr. Lizelle, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you by audio. Thank you again for calling in today. You know, if I can actually start with you, Dr. Lizelle, I understand you are still relatively new on island and currently possibly in quarantine still. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I landed here last Thursday, and luckily I had a place that I've already rented. So I'm in quarantine in my own place. So yes, I'm very happy to be here and just can't wait to get out of the quarantine so I can really be a part of the community.
Well, welcome to Cayman, and hopefully we'll see you in studio next month for Mental Health Matters.
Sure, definitely.
Yes. And Dr. Alexandra, welcome back to Talk Today.
Yes, thank you.
It's been a little while. When was the last time you were on the show?
Time before last, because last time my baby was brand new, so I didn't make it the last time. I barely made it today, but glad to be here, and we're grateful to Radio Cayman for always having us on.
Thank you, and congratulations again on your
new
family edition. Yeah. And Mr. Levon Bodden. Levon Bodden. I will get it. I promise you before we end the show, I will get everyone's name down pat. Yeah. Welcome to Talk Today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we've been asking all of our guests who have been on newish within the past few months how they kind of experienced the lockdown period and if they came away from lockdown with any new skills or any newfound visions on the world and how life is. And from your perspective, how was lockdown? How did you find it?
Oh, it was hellish.
Don't hold back. Let it all out.
It was hellish. I actually got displaced. I lived in Cayman for a little while. Just moved there. Okay. So I came to Grand to do some shopping right before the hard lockdown. And I got stuck while here during the hard lockdown because Cayman Airways kept canceling the flights for various reasons. And I've been here ever since. So as you can imagine, I've been, Caymanian saying is from pillar to post for the last 6 months or so.
6 months.
So it's been pretty tough.
With regards to coping through that, because that's been a challenging time.
Very
6 months without any kind of stability. What have you been doing? Any tricks you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I had to pull it out of the bag to survive.
Wow,
thank God for agencies like Meals on Wheels, Feed Your Future, that sort of thing. Thank God for the charity of people who put you up. Did a bit of surfing for a while. I'm settled now, thank God.
Good for you.
But I had to just work smarter because the system made it very difficult to navigate that experience. And you're just saturated with one outlet of news, and it didn't really dabble into mental health and how to cope with that at that time.
Fair enough. And it's a good thing we're having today's show because we can hopefully dabble a bit into that territory.
There we go.
But we are here to discuss mental health matters. Our topic today is personality disorders. Dr. Vaughn, the floor is yours.
No, I'm excited to cover this topic, and it's one that is less talked about, but one that I think is really important. And actually, I'm really glad for our panelists today as well. So Dr. Angelova, like myself, does a lot of work with persons with a history of abuse or violence or difficulties in the past, and a lot of times that comes with within this territory. So we're really glad to be talking about this because these are definitely things that are always considered with us when we're working with people, especially like myself and Dr. Angelova, anyone working from more of a trauma-informed perspective. But also Mr. Levon actually contacted me, I think it was last year, had heard the show, was thrilled about it, and then when we heard the topic...
I get on the show.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for
I'm
having
really
me.
glad to have you on, yeah. So it's a topic, as I said, less talked about, but a really important one, I think, as well. So we'll go through the different kinds of personality disorders. It's actually divided into 3 different clusters, and a lot of us will be able to relate to a lot of them. And so I think it's just ways of understanding how we function and what goes on in our relationships, but also and how we see the world. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play with it. And then we'll look at the different ones and what they are and what it's like to live with them, as well as treatments that are available too.
So I guess in a general nutshell, so you mentioned there's 3 different clusters of personality disorders. What, in effect, is a personality disorder then?
So a personality disorder is going to be a long-standing pattern of ways of being able to deal with relationships and the ways that we see ourselves in the world. And it's going to be... when it gets to the point of a personality disorder, a lot of times it's going to be ones that are maybe not as helpful. So, or they consider inflexible ways of being able to deal with it. So it's going to be different traits that come along that affect ourselves and how we see each other and how we view our relationships as well. I had the actual definition on my computer, which just shut down.
No, you gave a pretty good thorough explanation.
Yeah. Well, and they've also been changing the way that they do the diagnosis as well, for realizing that most of us will have different traits. And so I think even though we'll talk about the different categories, it's also important to realize that a lot of us will have a lot of different aspects of them too.
So when we say the word because personally I tend to look at the word disorder and go, why? For a topic that's such a hard topic to discuss for so many, that word disorder tends to increase some inflexibility if people want to discuss the topic. Yeah. But is it a scenario where we're talking about people's responses being, and just a consistent pattern of responses that are unhelpful to their lives?
Yeah. So maladaptive inflexible patterns is generally how it was referred to.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a lot of us, as I said, say when we talk about anxiety, depression, a lot of us can relate to the symptoms, the different characteristics, but when it begins to cause us distress or begins to interfere with our daily functioning is when it becomes more of a difficulty, more of a disorder. Personality disorders don't tend to be diagnosed until adulthood. So generally over 18 years. So you might see different traits that are present, and a lot of times there are traits present from earlier on, especially with some of the stronger ones. But we don't diagnose it unless it's into adulthood.
Why is that? What's the reason for wait?
So the personality is more established. Yeah.
Okay.
Personality disorders tend to be longer standing. So they while we have therapy to help with them, a lot of times they do tend to be persistent.
Okay.
And it's important for us when we're working with people to understand, because personality disorders will affect the way that we're working with anxiety, the way that we're working with depression. But I think it's still important to remember that even when we look at these, just like we do with anxiety and depression, it's a person who's dealing with this, right? So. Sure.
It's we did unfortunately just lose Dr. Lizelle. So Dr. Lizelle, if you are listening, please do give us a call back.
Yeah.
Sorry. So back to the disorders again. I'm going to try to avoid using the word disorder during the show, but
it's okay. That's how it's diagnosed.
It is.
And it is. So diagnosis itself tends to be controversial. These ones in particular are very controversial. Sure. And that's why I think it's more the psychologists that tend to deal with it, because we tend to deal with all levels of everything that goes on. Some of the other professions don't deal with them as much. And actually, it was considered such an important way of understanding the person, right? So we always talk about understanding the whole person, that we actually would diagnose personality disorders or traits or features on a separate axis. So our previous way of diagnosing actually had 5 different axes. And personality disorders or features were actually put on Axis 2 away from ones like anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, because it was important for understanding how to work with the person.
Okay.
They've put them all together now, and they're actually diagnosing based on more of a continuum as opposed to just strictly features as opposed to just strictly the symptoms or no symptoms.
What do you mean by continuum? If you could elaborate a bit.
That there's different levels that people
of the
experience.
disorders. Okay, sorry.
Exactly.
All right, so theoretically, if we're talking about a scenario where children might, and we'll delve more into the clusters themselves, but if we're talking about a situation where children will possess some of these traits at a young age, but we don't diagnose until they're older, does that continuum then allow for potentially addressing it with children at a younger age or before they reach adulthood?
Yeah. So a lot of times clinically we will note if there are features or traits of it. And so I do a lot of work with borderline personality disorder. And so those kinds of traits, I've seen narcissism as well will sometimes be evident from earlier on. Some of the other personality disorders as well, schizoid. Schizoid tends to look like autism. Right, and the schizoid, the schizotype, the schizotypal, and the paranoid tend to have overlapping features with some of the psychotic disorders as well. So,
okay, there's a lot here.
Clear as mud.
There's going to be a lot of overlap, and I appreciate that entirely.
Well, let me say. So there's 3 different clusters, and the idea is just that they capture different ways of different personality types and ways of people interacting, right, with the world, essentially. And so then there's cluster A, which tends to be the odd and eccentric type, which are the ones like schizoid, schizotypal, as well as paranoid. And so they tend to each of them have different features that we'd be looking for, defining features. But if there are any concerns that someone feels like they're dealing with this, then it's important not to diagnose yourself, but to go and talk to a mental health professional, because there is a lot of overlap with other disorders as well.
Sure. And just in reading cluster A, it might have described me.
Actually,
in reading cluster A.
Whenever I take personality tests, because I always do them before I give them to anyone else, schizotypal is one I often come up with.
For yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm reading the definition of cluster A, and it's a disorder that, and this was from Psychology Today. So just a very general platform, but disorders are characterized by odd or eccentric patterns of thinking, such as extreme social detachment. I'm looking at myself in lockdown. I was like, I was quite happy being socially so everybody else. Distrust and unusual beliefs. And I've had some funny beliefs throughout my life.
That's where a lot of us can relate to a lot of the characteristics.
So, and then it's just a matter of if these behaviors then cause my daily life to be rather fragmented or just unable to really cope with day-to-day life, that's when we fall into the category of treatment for a disorder.
Right. Yeah. And I'd say a lot of times the personality disorders don't tend to be uncomfortable for the person. Some do come with higher distress, like borderline. So that's one that tends to have an effect on the person. But a lot of them are more affect the relationships. So ones like narcissism tends to more affect the people around them as opposed to them. So personality disorders are what we call ego-syntonic, in that they tend to be, that's who the person is. So it's not uncomfortable. It's not like a depression or an anxiety that is imposed on them.
Correct.
So that's what we call ego-dystonic. Right. This is who they are.
Ego-dystonic.
Yep.
I'm going to throw out some big words here today. And there will be a test after the show and a contest.
Yeah. Well, and
dystonic.
Because this is not as talked about, a lot of it is going to be informational.
Sure.
And that was what I had planned for today.
No,
and
absolutely.
Whenever I teach psychology, the abnormal psych class, this is always my students' favorite one.
Absolutely.
Everyone can always relate to some of them, and you can see a lot of the traits in friends and family. So it's an interesting one, and one that I really appreciate.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Well, let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll explore more of clusters A, B, and C, and then invite Mr. Bodden to join the conversation. Back with more talk today, right after this.
Depending on the severity of a storm, it is possible that your home's plumbing or septic tank could be damaged. Hazard Management Cayman Islands recommends using a garbage bag to line at least 2 5-gallon containers with tight-fitting covers to use as a temporary toilet. Be sure to include personal sanitation supplies in your emergency kit, such as moist towelettes, feminine hygiene products, garbage bags, and rubber gloves. For more useful hurricane preparedness tips, visit the Water Authority's website at www.waterauthority.ky or follow us on social media.
As the community continues to take precautions from COVID-19, it is important to stay prepared for other disasters now that we're in the hurricane season. Here are some post-hurricane safety tips from the Department of Environmental Health. Always separate debris from household garbage after a hurricane. Debris includes roofing materials, tree branches, and metals. All items of debris must be placed in separate piles and must not cause obstruction to roadways or come in contact with electrical lines. For full guidance on post-hurricane safety tips, visit www.deh.gov.ky.
The Ministry of Tourism's Displaced Tourism Employee Stipend Program has reopened for registration from Monday 2nd November through Wednesday 4th November. This fourth registration period is for new registrants only, and all information must be supplied via the online portal stipend.ourcayman.ky by the deadline 4th November. Email stipend@caymanislands.ky with any questions.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in for today's show, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and very pleased to have in studio Dr. Alexandra Bodden and Dr. Mr. Levon Bodden as well, joining the conversation here on mental health matters and discussing personality disorders. In case you're just tuning in again, before the break, we were just going over the holistic topic of personality disorders, and now we're actually going to break this down into the three individualized clusters, as they call them, for personality disorders. Dr. Bodden, again, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and so these, of course, are long-standing patterns, like we said. So when we do, and so essentially this would be done by a psychologist, a psychiatrist. We do an interview with the person to get information about them, get a lot of history from them, and a lot of times we'll get corroborating information as well from a family member or someone who's known the person as well. Because as we said, some of these affect the person, but a lot of times they more affect the people around them. So we talked about cluster A is having one's paranoid personality disorder. And so this is going to be people who are very concerned about people around them, who believe that people are out to get them, right? And so it's not going to be to the point of a full psychotic episode like we would see with schizophrenia, but more just kind of a general pattern, right, of distrust of other people.
That basically sums up every CNN watcher out there right now.
Every what?
Every CNN watcher right now probably falls into that category.
True.
Okay.
And some of it's cultural.
Some of it is cultural. Fair enough. Is it a scenario where that, with regards to that one, like the conspiracy theorist mentality? Okay.
Yeah, so those tend to fall into this line.
Fair enough.
If the beliefs are very extreme or bizarre, then it might fall more into the psychotic disorder. So that's where you'll see a lot of overlap between these, especially this cluster with the other disorders as well.
Okay.
Schizoid personality disorder, basically a person who's not interested in other people. They don't have friends or anyone around, but they're okay with it. They're not upset by it. And that's schizoid, is just kind of not interested in others. You can hear by the beginning of these that these are the ones that are related to schizophrenia.
Sure, okay.
And schizotypal is going to be very odd and eccentric. I don't know if I said that on air or not, but that's one I often come up with. I really enjoy like a lot of like, I guess, unusual beliefs, and I have my mother to thank for that, who's very into crystals and, energies and everything like that. So I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer in all of that. Schizotypal is going to be like that kind of odd, eccentric. I know I've had several people in my life that I think would fall into this category, and they're different, but they're okay with it.
Absolutely. Now, when it says abnormal thinking and behavior patterns, that word abnormal there is kind of a tricky one for me. What does abnormal mean in this context?
Right. And so it's going to be kind of the beliefs and like the energies and that kind of stuff, but to another level.
Okay.
So they're going to just take it a little bit further, and their life is going to revolve around that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think probably like a lot of like the hippies or like the people who are more into like the heavy spiritual practices will fall into
Sure.
there. So.
Okay.
And I need to be careful. That's a gross generalization, so not everyone, but just to get an idea
Absolutely, yes.
of how it would work.
Just to
Yeah.
And I appreciate this. It's no intention to insult anyone here. They're making general
just
comments
to understand.
just to really understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even and clients that I've worked with that have had these have found it easier if people can understand what's going on as well and having something to relate to.
Sure.
Just helps you to connect the dots, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, because you can see where the person is coming from. And I think if you can understand what's going on and why it's happening, because people make assumptions, right? If someone comes in dressed unusually or, saying unusual things, then people make a lot of assumptions. But if you can understand where it's coming from, a lot of times it's really helpful.
I'm laughing just because this is not a funny topic, but I'm laughing just because I fit into a bit of these, and I've done some funny things with outfits just to cause a reaction. I'm like, I might fall into this category right now.
I've got a garden dress that I think looks like a garden, and that I love to wear. And I told people about it one day, and they were like, "Do I?" So I quit telling people about my garden dress. It's just a pretty green dress with lots of unusual designs on it.
I had to have a meeting one time with someone who I wasn't particularly fond of.
Yeah.
So I wore a stuffed toy on my head. Just to make it more uncomfortable than it had to be. And it's... Anyhow, hopefully I don't fall into this category.
I'll send you one of my tests after this, and you can see where you fall.
But I think to some degree, everybody has a mental health. We say issue. I can try and find a different word. But mental health issue. Well, what that really is the health of your mind. Mm-hmm. So that's not a diagnosis. So we all have some issue. It's just to what degree, what variant, what cluster, what diagnosis.
Sure. Exactly.
So there's not a group over there like the leper. We all suffer in some shape or form, and most people suffer in silence, and we shouldn't have to. And that's why we're having these conversations. Mm-hmm. It's, you can make it, you will survive, it'll be okay, and we just need to have more and more of these conversations to make it a cultural norm. And so that instead of ostracizing people in society, we uplift them, give them the support they need. And they're usually the most brilliant people in the world, if I do say so myself.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well said.
They thought that Albert Einstein was mad. Hey.
In their time, geniuses are often perceived as
there you go,
quite far out. They fall somewhere in the spectrum.
Actually, there's studies that are showing that intelligence is linked with all of this too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have no doubt, absolutely no doubt at all. Okay, so let's finish up these clusters, because I definitely want to get Mr. Levon here into the conversation.
You can call me Mr. Borden.
I want to call you Mr. Borden because I'm going to continue.
Dr. Borden, Mr. Borden.
It makes it much easier for me to navigate this
We'll
conversation.
try to figure out how we are related. At some point, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure we are. But Mr. Levon's a big advocate as well, so I'm really glad he's on. I know you keep slipping up calling him Dr. Borden too, but he's a big advocate for mental health, and we really appreciate that too. So, all right, so there's cluster A, and a lot of times, a lot of the symptoms within the categories will overlap as well. So cluster B is going to be the more emotional ones. And so with that, we've got, and these are the ones that people have heard more about as well. And so in this group, we've got narcissistic personality disorder, which people are often, it's called the professor disorder. Mm-hmm. It's people who are very perceived as arrogant, but very into themselves and believe that they're better than others, and that they're looking for admiration, is what these people are looking for. I was gonna make it's a political joke. It's probably not appropriate. So
at tomorrow's election, freedom of free at this point. Tomorrow's elections, let out.
Well, there are people in the media who've been referred to like this, but narcissism is one that's very often talked about. The narcissistic parent is one that's been very popular recently as well, dealing because
the narcissistic parent.
Yes, so that's something that's been very popular recently. I've had a lot of people come in and asking about or talking to me about. Because it can be tied in with abuse in early childhood as well. But narcissism tends to be very into themselves.
Okay.
Kanye West would be an example.
Okay.
I hope
he has a diagnosis. He'll find.
Yeah, no, he's got another diagnosis. Is what I've heard, but kind of that personality. So I don't know what his diagnoses are.
Sure.
But that kind of personality, very strong and very seeking of admiration. Is he still in the running? He's not. Okay.
Now, we see that a lot
in his mind,
kids.
I think.
So when we circle back to kids in that conversation, because kids are usually all about, hey, me, here's my attention, my attention, my attention.
Yeah.
At what point do they grow out of that, from that? Because you can't I wouldn't call a 3-year-old a narcissist for saying, want all the attention, right?
No, that's why it's only diagnosed in adulthood. And teenagers tend to be very into themselves as well. So there's going to be normal stages where you go through a lot of these. Selfies? Yeah.
Selfies, yeah.
Actually, that was a big concern when selfies started.
Yeah.
That selfies were increasing narcissism.
Correct, yeah.
The studies have not quite panned out quite as strong as they had hoped.
Sure.
But that's the idea of it's feeding this idea of needing admiration, that, like having to have like 100 likes or 1,000 likes in order for a picture to be worthy or to feel that you're good enough.
Sure.
That's the catch with narcissism, is that a lot of times it's fake, right? The front is fake because it comes from an underlying self-doubt, and that you put up this front to try to get admiration because deep down you don't believe that you're good enough. So with narcissism also comes something called narcissistic rage, which is where if something is challenged or challenges the front or challenges those beliefs, then they get very angry, right? Because it goes against what's holding them together.
It's pierced that veil, and out comes the insecure monster underneath.
Yeah, and so there's going to be like normal levels of all of these. Once it becomes problematic in either our functioning or relationships is when it becomes more the disorder. We've got histrionic in here, which is what's not often talked about, but it is it's one that affects more with women. So narcissism tends to affect more men. Histrionic is like the old Hollywood movie stars. The women that would kind of faint on a dime. Very dramatic, and they are the ones that are looking for attention as well, but more sexual. So they tend to be more seductive. And so they tend to be very dramatic in that way.
When you said that the histrionic is more geared towards women and narcissistic personality disorder is geared towards men.
More common in
More
men.
common.
Both can happen in either.
Looking at the explanations of them, they're quite similar.
Mm-hmm. This cluster is gonna be similar, yeah.
Yeah, there's often a lot of overlap, and you can also, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Barton, you can also have co-occurring disorders or underlying mental health issues as well. So it's just not a one-off.
Two or more kind of things working together.
Most people who would meet criteria for personality disorder will meet for several.
Sure.
Yeah. There's probably going to be one that's the strongest.
Okay.
So
we do have to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll jump on to borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
Back with more talk today, right after this.
Maintaining a strong mind and body through sports and general healthy living is a good course of action. But what about your spiritual man, your inner man? He has to be awakened, fed, exercised, strengthened, and led according to the will of God. So, have you heard the call? I'm evangelist Brother Joseph Joey Ebanks, and I'm inviting you to worship Wednesday and Thursday nights at 7:30. We are bringing the Word of God to our communities as Jesus commanded. Faith comes by hearing, so come and hear. Bring your own chair or simply park and listen to the Word of God from your vehicle, covering the Cayman Islands with the Word of God, one community at a time.
Digital is not a buzzword, it is a culture. At Digicel, we've made it our mission to enrich your digital lives. That's why we're bringing together more of all the experiences you love. The latest shows, the best of local and international music and radio, live sports, cloud storage, breaking news, HD video chats, and more. Welcome to Digital at Digicel, the Caribbean's fastest mobile network. Digicel, better together.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
On a daily basis, making it easy to connect with you, our listeners. Add us to WhatsApp today, 925-3261. That's 925-3261.
Radio Cayman.
Send a text or voice note.
Can I send a request, please?
You don't really have to ask us. Just send a request.
This is a shout out to my ex. Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
Talk today. But I do have some questions.
Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to have in studio Dr. Bodden and Mr. Bodden here to discuss personality disorders as part of our Mental Health Matters show. Dr. Bodden, before the break, we were discussing Cluster B. There's 3 clusters that kind of make up the overarching personality disorders. And in Cluster B, we were discussing the narcissistic personality disorder, the histrionic personality disorder, and we're just about to touch on borderline personality disorder.
Yeah. And so as I said, these ones tend to be the more expressive ones. And if I said I tend to act them out, so the narcissist tends to be very kind of strong in themselves and looking for admiration. The histrionic tends to be very emotional. Borderline.
You're on video, so they could see you.
I know, that's what I realized on the break. It's okay. And I say that, but that is how they are, you know. Sure. And so that's a lot of times that's ways that you can pick up on it is the expressions and the gestures that they use. Borderline personality disorder is one of the better studied ones. As I said, cluster B tends to come from a history of trauma. So anyone who specializes with trauma will be familiar with borderline personality disorder in particular. Borderline and antisocial tend to be the two that come from a history of prolonged childhood abuse generally. And so it's not like having a car accident in childhood, it's more of like a chronic history of abuse. Borderline personality disorder is considered one of the more difficult ones to deal with because it does bring a lot of emotions. It's characterized by very high emotions and drastic mood swings as well. So emotional instability, difficulties with the sense of self, so not being sure of who you are, right? So you can see how these things are going to tie to the childhood abuse, right? With that, there's very high emotions. There's not only do you not learn how to self-regulate in that kind of childhood environment, but there's things that are happening as well. So high emotions tend to come from it. Difficulties with relationships, there's a lot of fears of abandonment. And with that, the person will often try to figure out if a person is going to be someone who's going to stay with them. And so there can be a lot of push and pull in relationships as well, where there's a lot of black and white thinking. So things will be going well for a while, and if that's good, then that's great. But if something happens and the person senses that there may be some abandonment, then they may pull back or attack the person. It's a way of protecting themselves by pushing the person away before they can leave. Yeah. And so and these are dynamics that play out in relationships, which make it difficult for the family members or the people around them. So this one is also hard for the person as well because they realize what's happening. But the good news is that while it's one of the more, because this plays out in therapy too, right? And so this is where a lot of therapists find it difficult to deal with. But I think if you can understand where it's coming from, that you can see how a lot of the behaviors line up with the past experiences. And if you can understand the reason why the behaviors happen, it's a lot easier to manage in therapy as well. And this one actually is one of the only ones that has a proven therapy as well, which is dialectical behavior therapy. Yeah.
DBT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that the DBT
dialectical
behavioral
someone
therapy.
came in and they're like, I want the diabolical behavior therapy. You've seen the homework sheets, haven't you? DBT is one that actually myself and Dr. Angelova do. It's a very intense program. Unfortunately, we don't have a full program on island. There are some overseas, but we run some of the groups, and we'll bring the different strategies and skills into our work with clients as well. But DBT was a game changer, especially with borderline personality disorder. There's also, with the impulsiveness, often comes a lot of suicidal ideation and self-harm, which is what DBT is actually geared towards. So while this is considered one of the more difficult ones, it's also one of the most treatable ones as well, which is great. So
actually, I just heard we have Dr. Lizelle on. That's actually the paradox I actually want to question in a second. We do have Dr. Lizelle on the line. Dr. Lizelle, you there with us?
Yes, I'm back now. I'm sorry about that.
No, quite all right. Welcome back to Talk Today. We do want to turn the conversation on towards Mr. Levon in just a moment, but is there anything else you would like to add on to the borderline personality disorder and the dialectical behavior? Did I get it right?
Yes, that's
all right. I can't get your names right, but I can get the big fancy words right.
DBT.
Yeah, ego dystonic.
Dr. Zell, anything you want to add on the DBT?
Well, DBT was specifically actually developed for borderline personality disorders by a lady called Dr. Marsha Linehan, and she's done really great work with that. She's also written many books and articles about it. There are also some self-help books that if you have somebody with borderline personality disorder in your family, it's very difficult to manage those interpersonal relationships. And there's one book specifically called Stop Walking on Eggshells. And there's another one, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, which is the dialectical side of it, written by Gerald Kreisman. And the Stop Walking on Eggshells is by Paul Mason and Randy Krieger. And these are two really good books. So if you have somebody in your family suffering from borderline personality disorder and you don't know how to cope and your family is falling apart, these are really good resources to go to.
Thank you so much for that. So that was it walking on eggshells?
Yes, it's actually called Stop Walking on Eggshells.
Stop walking on eggshells.
Yes, and it's kind of taking your life back when someone you care about has borderline personality disorders.
Okay, great. And then as far as the actual DBT treatment itself, I understand that's one of your focus points and specialties. What is kind of encompassed in that treatment method?
Well, it's about forming a dialectical, so it's two poles. And kind of finding the best life that you can find. It's very skills driven, so it's very much about interpersonal effectiveness, and this is what a person with borderline personality really needs, is to learn how to cope within relationships, because they have very deflected identities, and they actually kind of give that over to the people that they live with. And the people the people that are closer to them come to accept the borderline perception and view of reality, and they start feeling like I'm flawed and everything is my fault. Until they start realizing this, they've picked up the pattern from the person with borderline. Also, borderline personality can be very manipulative, and in dialectical behavior therapy, that's one of the things that we do is we teach them how not to sound manipulative. And very often they don't mean or intend to be manipulative, but that's how they come across. And it leaves the people that are in the relationships with them feeling very powerless. So with dialectical behavior therapy, you're working on that interpersonal relationship skills. You're also working on distress tolerance skills. Often borderline personalities will find themselves very overwhelmed and very distressed and very lost. It's like if you can think of a little girl walking in New York and suddenly getting parted from her mom's hand, and she's lost, and there's just all these strangers around. That is how borderline personality disorder patients actually feel, like very lost. And with dialectical behavior therapy, we teach them these distress tolerance skills to help them when they get into these distressed states.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Zell. Mr. Levon Bodden.
Yeah. Well, just to add to what the doctor was saying, it feels like you're in a maze with 6-foot walls. You can't climb over it, and you don't know what's before you, what's behind you. You're stuck in a maze, and you have to figure out how to get out of that maze.
And how do you get out of the maze?
Dialectical behavioral
so
therapy.
So it was the actual therapy itself that actually helped you navigate this maze.
It's in my experience, because this is the first time I've ever spoken out loud about my diagnosis. I was diagnosed at 26 with borderline personality disorder, which is a direct result of a very difficult and traumatic childhood. In my case, I've had a heightened intelligence since birth. So I researched my illness. I knew something was wrong, and that was not enough. What helped me was finding support in my higher power, and my spirituality is what saved my life. Because like Dr. Bodden said, you have a pattern and a history of suicidal behavior. And because of my religion and my faith, I'm alive today.
What prompted you to seek the diagnosis when you were 26?
I knew something was wrong. Life was becoming unmanageable. On one hand, here I am, this brilliant human being. On the other hand, having very difficult time with my relationships, whether that's at work, school, or at play. And I decided to be proactive and very methodic about my progress in life I wanted to achieve. And I knew I came from a family and a culture of generational abuse and ignorance towards mental health. So because of my personal experience, I engulfed myself in the information and helping myself to heal and recover from a life of trauma.
So just for our listeners that are at home who might either be struggling themselves or know someone who's struggling, You mentioned you had difficulties in your relationship, and that's a very broad term. What were some of the difficulties you were having when it came to work, when it came to your personal relationships, family? What were those challenges and difficulties that you kind of said, time out, this isn't normal, I need to go see somebody?
I wouldn't say it's not normal. It was not abnormal. Having borderline is my normal.
Sure.
And I accept.
Absolutely.
I affirm. It's being able to manage your symptoms in a way that fits today's societal molds.
Sure.
You know, when it came to work, I could get any job. I spoke very well from very young, and I shined bright in interviews. But when it came to being abused on the job, I did not know how to navigate that very well. And Cayman is it's well known that Caymanians are very much abused in the workplace on all levels. So I became very angry, and there was rage, there was outbursts, and those were reasons for termination or difficulties or interpersonal struggles and issues. So I had to learn how to reel it in, tame it, and to learn office politics to be able to flourish on the job, because you're up against all odds and you have this disorder as well.
And how about in your personal life?
Personal life, when you don't know who you are, it's say your partner, for example, does not know how to deal with it. They don't know how to work with you. One minute you're the most pleasant human being God ever created, and the next minute you're enraged, and you're just. And when I say that, you're triggered. So it's never you wake up angry, because I'm not an angry human, and I'm a very spiritual man. But once those days, once I was triggered, I could become very volatile. And my abuse towards a person was never physical or intentional, but the abuse was verbal. And I'm a wordsmith. I could admit that I'm a wordsmith, and I would use that because of my pain and my internal struggles. I would use that rage would come out and abuse that person, and that would shun anybody from being in a relationship with you for very long, especially when they couldn't understand, and particularly before the diagnosis and understanding it very well.
Thank you for sharing, Ms. Broughton. On that note, we do have to go to our 1 p.m. headline news. When we come back, we'll be discussing more mental health matters. Back to more Talk Today right after this.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have, on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
The Cayman Islands government has launched a cybersecurity public education campaign targeting people of all ages. Better Cyber Safe Than Sorry is an initiative of the Office of Cyber and Information Security, and it focuses on good online practices and strategies to protect yourself from becoming the victim of cybercrime. In international headlines, Islamic State militants in Afghanistan stormed the Kabul University today as it hosted a book fair attended by the Iranian ambassador, sparking an hours-long gun battle, leaving at least 22 dead and 22 wounded at the war-torn country's largest school. Most of the casualties were students, and there are fears the death toll could climb further, with some of the wounded said to be in critical condition. This is the second attack on an educational institution in Kabul in as many weeks. Poland's prime minister today appealed for talks with the leaders of massive protests triggered by the tightening last month of the nation's strict abortion law, protests that have been continuing despite a resurgence of COVID-19. Just hours before the latest round of nationwide marches began today, the head of the right-wing government, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, made a video appeal to protesters and opposition leaders, asking them to sit down and talk. The appeal did not stop protesters with signs calling for abortion rights from blocking streets and traffic circles in Warsaw, Poland's capital, and other cities like Krakow for the 12th straight day. From Radio Cayman's newsroom, I'm April Cummings.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
King Sports Center takes pride in being more than just an ordinary gymnasium. For 14 years, their multi-purpose facility has been providing the community with a variety of sporting, recreational, and relaxation activities. King Sports Center has a bowling alley, lounge bar, multi-purpose rooms, powerhouse gym, rock climbing wall, bungee jumping, a 10,000 square foot rink, and so much more. For more information on the variety of services, call their friendly staff today at 946-5464 or email kings@candw.ky or visit www.kingsportscenter.com. King Sports Center, your one-stop shop for fitness, recreation, and relaxation.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. And I'm pleased to have in studio again for Mental Health Matters, Dr. Alexandra Bodden, psychologist with Encore's Cayman, Dr. Lizelle Angelova, a psychologist with Encore's Cayman as well, and very new addition to our islands, and Mr. Levon Bodden, who is here to discuss his experience with having borderline personality disorder and how he's managed to get through today.
Yeah, I'm in a good space today.
You're in a good space today.
To God be the glory.
Good for you. I'm very happy to hear that you're in a good space today. If everyone is in a good space all the time, the world would be a very happy place.
Right? Well, you wouldn't know it was happy, though.
We wouldn't. We would just be like a utopian bliss.
Yeah.
So before the break, again, we were discussing, we had delved more into the borderline personality within Cluster B, but there's 3 clusters for those listeners that are just tuning in within the personality disorder family, for lack of a better term. With Cluster C now. Let's walk through some of these. Or, sorry, you have more of Cluster B.
Cluster B also has antisocial personality disorder.
Yes.
And so you guys will, this is one I often talk about as well. So borderline and antisocial are 2 I often talk about. Antisocial is not what it sounds like. It's not people who don't like to be around people or people who are nervous in social situations. Antisocial is actually against society. So this is actually involve more criminal activity, delinquency. Antisocial personality disorder is the only one that has to have a diagnosis from childhood. It's not the first diagnosis. A lot of times we'll start in childhood, might start with ODD, but there has to be a diagnosis of conduct disorder before age 15. So conduct disorder involves things like stealing, use of a weapon, running away. In teenagers, there's a bit more leniency with that, but it has to be inappropriate for the age. So running out, breaking rules, criminal activity, hurting other people intentionally, hurting animals, setting fires, that kind of thing. So it tends to be quite extreme behaviors. So there has to be a diagnosis of conduct disorder in the teenage years in order to get a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder.
Okay.
Antisocial personality disorder many times are people involved in criminal activity, but the main characteristics are going to be similar to psychopathy. Not the same thing, but this diagnosis was developed to capture, not to capture, that sounds bad. A lot of them end up in jail. As a way of diagnosing psychopathy. Sure. Psychopathy is not an actual diagnosis, right? Which is a psychopath. But this diagnosis was developed as a way of kind of following along with that. Psychopathy is also mainly diagnosed based on personality characteristics, which aren't really behaviors. And the DSM, our way of diagnosing, has moved more to behavioral measures. So antisocial personality disorder will a lot of times account for persons who would meet criteria for psychopathy, but also include a lot of other people too. More common in males as well. And as I said, all of Cluster B tends to be linked to a history of trauma. And so the idea is that a lot of times with borderline, the emotions tend to come out. Antisocial, it's gone the other way. The emotions are turned off. They tend to be kind of very cold, very callous. They tend to be manipulative intentionally, and they tend to be ones that don't really connect genuinely with others. Very charming, a lot of times very intelligent as well. But that's antisocial. So it's not being afraid of people. That's going to be more of social anxiety. Antisocial is against society. That's how I tell my students to remember it. So it's ASPD. Cluster C anxious and fearful patterns. So avoidant personality disorder is going to be people who have, it's basically like a very severe social anxiety, very afraid of other people and of judgment and what's going to happen. And so a lot of times they will then just avoid social situations. And that one can be very, very difficult for the person as well. That one tends to be very high anxiety. Dependent personality disorder is going to be people who rely on others for everything, right? And so they don't trust themselves to be able to do anything. And a lot of times that kind of personality will link up with something like a narcissist, because the narcissist likes people who rely on them, and the dependent likes people who will tell them, who will be there and seem very strong for them. So in that way, a lot of times the different personality traits will kind of find others that complement them. And then the obsessive compulsive personality disorder is the last of these. OCPD, it's going to be similar to obsessive compulsive disorder, but not have the level of discomfort. So OCD is very extreme ritualized behaviors, and a lot of times people spend hours doing different rituals to try to manage the anxiety that they're feeling. And so OCPD is going to be a lot of those behaviors, but not that extreme. So it's just kind of a way of being very fixed and very rigid with rules. This is one I tend to be high on, and pretty much anyone in graduate school comes out high on this because it's necessary.
That's basically type A behavior, right?
I'm not sure with any of them. Some of the traits are helpful. So, but OCPD is similar to OCD, but more consistent and more their way of being, as opposed to the distress that you get with the disorder. If that makes sense.
It does. So
so OCD tends to bring more distress. OCPD is just kind of their way of being.
Sure. Okay. I think I've got the now. And so if you mentioned that the abuse tends to drive cluster B.
Yes.
What is the driver for cluster A and C?
So some of it will be genetic. Some of it will be environmental. But the cluster B in particular tends to be driven by a history of trauma. Yeah. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of different factors that come in, as with any mental illness. We believe in the diathesis stress model that there'll be some genetic predisposition for it. And then depending on the environment that the person is living in, it will depend if it comes out or not. Okay. And so for A and for C, there's going to be some genetic background, some environmental influences, but B in particular is going to be heavily driven by trauma.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. This is true.
Okay.
I would say, I'll start here. I think, thinking back, I'm so grateful that I am where I am today. But thinking back, would I've changed that circumstance and situation? 1,000%. It was beyond comprehension, the suffering that I endured. And not only at the hands of my abusers with an S, but with the internal struggles and being very intelligent and overthinking and all the other additives and culture and everything else that surrounds me, I would have changed it immediately. Today, I'm grateful for the pain and suffering, because it formed the person that I am, and it formed the advocate, and it formed my belief systems. Like Dr. Barton said, we are very emotional people, and that's not only because of that diagnosis. I am an ENFP personality type, so that's the biological component. That's who I am by nature, and I'm a very emotional and passionate human being. And the driver of the abuse drove me to stray from societal norms, to be able to fight, and the ability to speak the way that I do at the level that I do. It allows me now to be a voice for people who have no voice and who will tend to suffer in society. And I would like to help educate society on how to work with persons who struggle with whatever diagnosis or variant of mental health issues. So there's not one in particular that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about everybody taking care of the health of their minds, whether that's through nutrition, through therapy, through mindfulness, through spirituality or whatever. I want to encourage this, especially when times get more difficult, COVID, etc., etc., etc. Life isn't getting easier for us. It's getting more difficult. So we need to learn the tools and the coping mechanisms to survive this and to thrive. And we need to break down the barriers of stigma and the abuse, the systemic abuse through legislation that affects persons who suffer the most in society. I am very much an advocate for those who suffer with severe mental health issues.
So
They're
systemic
very
abuse through legislation. I mean, systemic. Is that how you said? Systemic
abuse
through legislation.
Through
What do you refer to?
Well, the mental health law needs to be addressed. It's a dangerous law. It's not written with the person in mind. It is written on how to truant that those individuals. So, for example, we institutionalize people here in Cayman. We don't therapize them. We don't encourage and foster recovery and walk them through the therapeutic process to be their best selves and just be who they are. They're not going to be anybody else but who they are. What we do is we ship them off to other countries, and out of sight is out of mind in Cayman. And there's a lot of people who are in Jamaica right now, for example, who've been there for years and can't get back home because of this legislation, and they want to come home. So one of the reasons I never spoke about this because I'm very open about my mental health. It's never been a secret, but I've been hesitant to speak about it out loud because of the system and the abuses and the repercussions for being very candid. And, for example, there's a lady, Miss Teresa Powery, who wants to come home from Jamaica. She's been there going on 8 years, if I'm not mistaken, and she can't get home because of that said legislation, and that's not right, and that's not fair. And I would go as far as to say that Caymanians, in general, are suffering with mental health issues, and it's increasing in numbers, and to the degree is also increasing. And the more difficult life gets, we all are going to suffer. And it's not time to suffer in silence. It's time to get out there, get out and be loud and be proud. Accept who you are and learn to cope in life. And you don't always have to fit in. That makes you an individual. But you have to be able to, frame a pattern of societal norms for yourself. You can't go around cursing people out all day long. It's not nice. So
no, it's not.
You can't do it all day long. So you need to be able to work with other people and so on and so forth. So that's been my struggle, because I speak about myself in third party because I am becoming a whole person. When you have borderline personality disorder, you really don't know who you are. You don't know what direction you're going. When you have a family who are, with all due respect, ignorant towards the topic matter, there's no guidance, there's no direction. The schools does not teach and elevate. And I think it would be safe to say that most people get diagnosed after they go to prison. And that's not how this thing should work. Early diagnosis is key to being successful and not having to endure so much pain and suffering. I suffered severely. I truly did. But I did it when I walked in the streets in society. People looked at me and saw an individual who came across as presenting well. But internally, it was very, very difficult. So as I piece myself together, put the puzzle together to make the whole person, and that is a process, I'm understanding and accepting of who I am and where I'm going. After the first 40 were difficult, the next 40 are going to be great. So,
and if you were talking to someone listening right now, face to face, no cameras around, no microphone around, what do you say to them to help them through to make the decision to seek help or to take on that research that you took on when you were 26?
Well, I did this from the time I was 5 years old.
Or when you were 5. What would you? I heard you say 26 earlier, so I referenced that 26.
I was diagnosed at 26.
Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
What do you say to them to get over that fear of whatever the fear, whether the fear is being stigmatized, whether the fear is just facing the mirror, whatever that fear might be that they're facing? What would you say to them to help them get over that fear?
I would firstly say that fear is normal and that you just need to learn how to curb the fear and not let that control you. You control it. You manage it. And how I did that was I engulfed myself in my spirituality and in educating myself on the subject matter. because I wasn't diagnosed till 26, but I was well versed on mental health from very young, and helping other people and counseling and Boy Scout leader and junior achievement advisor. I was quite stellar growing up, and I just think the greatest lesson I've learned is that you just need to accept yourself. It is who you are, and you're just striving now to be the best version of yourself. And confidence goes up, not arrogance. Don't get it twisted, but confidence is key, and standing in your truth, being who you are and accepting it, and makes life that much easier. It is the key. And then of course therapy will help with the tools and the coping and and keeping your checks and balances and keeping it together, and just keeping you abreast of health, your general health, not just the health of the mind, but mind, body, and soul, and making those connections. It's great. I do DBT. I'm also now doing neurofeedback, so I'm training my mind to be calm.
Neural feedback.
Neurofeedback. So you put little neuro things,
little
on whatever that word is, on your brain,
yeah.
And it there's a monitor, and it measures the electricity and the wavelengths in your brain, for the lack of proper terminology, and you have to maintain a certain level and keep calm. So I do a lot of mindfulness, a lot of things that keep me at peace, keep me calm, keep me less reactive, keep me from triggering, which is a technical term. What happens is persons with borderline, particularly in my case, I am a very kind human being, and then all of a sudden I can be a very angry human being. But I don't wake up like that. I wake up with the joy of the Lord in my heart, but people trigger me, or things trigger me. So when I see abuse, when I see wrongdoings, when I see poor, people who are poor or impoverished or marginalized and so on and so forth, who are suffering and hurting and can't help themselves and don't know where to go, what to do, that makes me very angry. And I think it would make anybody angry with any sort of empathy or compassion. But with borderline, it is heightened. And then that is what affected my life, the heightened response to what is actually normal, quote unquote. So you just got to be able to reel it in, curb it, and don't get lost in translation.
Was it a scenario of figuring out first what your triggers were and then how to manage how you respond to those triggers? Or how did you actually identify what your triggers were?
I know what my triggers are.
Okay. Was it
bad behaved people and bad laws and bad rules and bad regulations. It's just badness. To speak more West Bay, just badness. I don't condone badness. I mean, not saying that I'm perfect and I didn't do anything bad.
Sure.
I might have stolen a candy from a store as a child. I don't even recall, because I have anterograde amnesia as well, as a part of coping and surviving the trauma in my childhood. I just don't like injustice. I just don't like. But that's okay. Let's put it this way. That's why I wouldn't change it today. That's what drives me to be I am a good man, and every day I'm trying to be a better man until I become a great man. And then I go and meet my maker and my mom and my grandma and my grandpa, which is AKA Daddy. And that's what drives me. I want to be the best version of myself. I accept Levon. He's a great guy. He's a good man. And I want everybody out there, whatever diagnosis or struggles, whether it's anxiety, OCD, it's all in the family of mental health. Mm-hmm. Mental health does not mean you're crazy. Mental health, am I right, Dr. Borden?
No.
You're not crazy. You just have some sort of little niche, and it's like having diabetes, or it's like you broke your leg or whatever. It's an impairment, so to speak, and you just need to know how to navigate this world with that little, let's call it a shortcoming for argument's sake.
And then the last question then for you, how did you find the neural therapy? What did you call it again?
Neurofeedback.
Neurofeedback. How are you finding the progress with that?
I love it, man. Just sit down. I've been lost in translation because of the borderline, the response, not necessarily the borderline, the response and the passion for what is right. So keeping calm is great for me. So I sit in a chair, I get hooked up, the doctor monitors it, there's no talking. It's not talk therapy. You just look at the monitor,
this is talk therapy.
And it's like fire or water or something relaxing. I just sit there, relax. So it helps me to formulate that pattern for my life of making the time to be mindful and taking care of yourself, and to be calm and to be centered and to go into yourself and just knowing who you are, and you come out of there feeling like a brand new baby, so to speak.
So to speak.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So it's just a constant flow of happiness. And you're sitting there trying to maintain that state.
Yes. Like Dr. Barton would know. She, for me, I was tightly wounded, very anxious, nervous, worried, and that created co-occurring issues like anxiety and panic attack. Oh, they're terrible. They used to be terrible. I've mastered all of these things, and I could teach a class or two on these things. Had anxiety, OCD, and this, that, the next. I don't know how that the little guy made it, and it's just all too much to bear. So don't do it in silence anymore. Don't be afraid of repercussions. They're bad people if you be reprimanded for being who you are. But you have to be mindful of your own actions. Sure. You can't control other people's behaviors, but you can control yours. So that's why you should seek out therapy, particularly in a society that does not offer it very much, and it's quite expensive to go into a private practice, and the government system is inundated with customers, but everything's secret. For example, the HSA had the outpatient clinic at the back of the hospital, and now they've moved it to a different building, like top secret. No, we need that on the cruise ship dock. Need to be able to see that sucker, because if they need a little help too, they can come in and get a little neurofeedback, a little mindfulness, a little spa treatment, whatever. This should not be stigmatized and demonized like how this society has done it. It should be like you going to the spa and just taking care of yourself, your liberty, and your well-being. That's really what it is.
Perhaps that is the future of mental health care. I think for now, there's a lot that still is felt to be very personal about it. So I can imagine the need for a separate building is just I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, there's always those people who are more private, and you respect that. So you have, it's a balancing act, but I think it should be in the forefront of our minds, especially now after COVID. And now we got a hotline and this and that, but how effective and how efficient is it? And I know personally how ineffective and inefficient it is. And there's a lot of bridges that need to be gapped. And that's why we're having these conversations. Sure. That's why I'm being so candid. I don't live in fear. I am Levon Borden.
Good for you. We do have Dr. Liesel on the line, and I feel bad that we've left her very quiet for the past little bit here. Dr. Liesel, anything you want to add on the treatment of the borderline personality disorders again, whether the dialectical or the...
Yeah, I think many therapists work in a more eclectic approach. So we don't only use CBT or DBT. I often start off with a more psychodynamic approach. So that's basically going back to the person's childhood and resolving some of the trauma that has happened there. And then go on to either CBT or DBT when the person has processed some of the emotion and the trauma that has happened. And then, then moving from there. Very important what Mr. Bodden said is not to suffer in silence. And I always tell my clients that is to do not suffer in silence, because there's a lot of help out there. You can do individual therapy. There's long-term therapy. There's short-term therapy. There's family therapy, couples therapy, group therapy. Sorry, someone's knocking on my door, but I can't go and answer that now. But if you're hearing this noise. And there's also a lot of self-help groups. There's a lot of self-help books out there. Some people that have comorbid conditions would need psychiatric medication. So, yes, just have an openness about what's happening to you and go and seek professional assistance, because that's where you're going to find the help.
Thank you. You actually raised one of my next questions was in regards to medication. I then don't tend to personally view medication as a solution for many things, but with regards to these disorders, how is the medication? Is there medication to help with these disorders, or how does that work?
Yeah. So anytime, for any kind of mental illness, there's actually medications can be an option. Sometimes it will be necessary for some of the more severe ones like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. And even then, not always, but a lot of times in those disorders, it's going to be more of a main focus. But medications can be useful for managing symptoms with anything. So it's not going to treat it or make it go away, but it will help with managing the symptoms.
Sure.
Right? Because a lot of times, as Mr. Levon had said, there's comorbid disorders. Actually, Dr. Angelova just said as well. So with it comes anxiety, comes depression, and so with that, medications can be helpful for things like lowering the levels of anxiety or lowering levels of stress, which can predispose you to being more impulsive. If you're really stressed, you can be more likely to have emotional outbursts. If there's difficulty sleeping, medications can be useful for that. Any of the ones that venture into more of the psychotic realm, then you can use antipsychotics as well. So for that would be meeting with a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I like that they all kind of touched on that there are a lot of different therapies available, a lot of different therapists available. And so even if you've tried therapy or tried medications and it didn't work, I recommend if it's therapy, maybe reaching out to someone else, try a different kind of therapy. If it's medications, be honest with the provider, tell them it's not working or it's weird side effects or that you're not comfortable taking it.
Sure.
A lot of psychiatrists will discuss supplements if you're not wanting to take medications right away. So you can look at all options. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I would like to add something to that. Medication, for me, in my personal opinion and experience, medication should not be shunned. Because you take medication, that person crazy. No. You take medicine for headaches, you take medicine after a surgery, you take whatever. It's normal. Don't separate it. Don't detach it. But I would say don't make it a lifestyle either, because you can become dependent on it. The ultimate goal is to master these things versus depending on medication, because they do have adverse effects.
Sure.
And I think there should be more emphasis on nutrition and mindfulness. We live by the water, so it's important for us to protect our beaches so we can get out there. Nutrition, Cayman is very expensive, and GMO is cheaper than organic and that sort of thing. So that's why in my fight, and because of my journey, I'm fighting for a cooperative to help poorer persons to get the nutrition they need and the two soft skills as well. How to use them, how to just live in the space that you're in and in your situation and accept it, and just continue to grow and excel and better yourself. Nutrition and mindfulness is more important to me than medicine. But if you're having, so let's call it a hard time, yes. My mom passed away 2.5 years ago, so I went on antidepressants for the first time because I was anti-medicine, this sort of thing, and it really helped to keep me on a more even keel and calm and go through the mourning process better than not, because that would have been a very difficult situation for me if I didn't do the other things. Because in my experience, my mom's abandonment and those issues of being abandoned throughout life, she was the most precious human being in my life. I dedicated my life to my mom, and I knew she was going to die from the age of 8 years old, but she lived much longer by faith. And what happened in my case was I recognized that the little boy had suffered so much, he had already mourned her. So I didn't mourn her twice, but I wanted to make sure I didn't go into a deep depression or act out in any way. It's normal. I lost the love of my life. That was that little boy's love of his life. So I took the medication for a little while to keep me together. And what was most important was therapy. I believe in the therapeutic process and a holistic approach, and nutrition. Taking my vitamins, going to the beach, finding time, making the time, being mindful. Regardless of your circumstances in life, you can find 5 minutes, take deep breaths, go by the water, watch the sunset, be grateful, say your affirmations. Little simple soft skills and tools to use.
Absolutely.
And it makes all the difference. But don't shun medication. It does help, but I think it should be temporary and not a lifelong thing, unless you have very, very severe mental health illness or issues.
Mr. Levon, actually on that note, very quickly? Only 1 minute.
Okay, if I can go really quickly.
Very quick, sorry.
So a lot of times medications can actually make therapy more effective, as Ms. Levon was referring to it. If it can manage them more, like if you're going through something like a major loss, it can help to reduce, or panic attacks, any of the more severe symptoms, it can reduce that to let therapy. I say deep breathing's good, but if it's the middle of a panic attack, Xanax is better. And so, if you're having recurrent panic attacks, the deep breathing doesn't work. I've had this happen with a lot of clients. It's very frustrating. And you decide therapy doesn't work, right? But if you can manage those with the medications, or if you can get some sleep, or if we can take away some of the more severe depressive symptoms, it can allow therapy to work. Therapy will then create the longer lasting change. And so in that way, therapy and medications can often work well together. Some people will choose one or the other, and that's up to you. But there are a lot of options available. If I may just, you made some great points earlier. Decreasing stigma and helping people understand what therapy is, what mental illness is. Mental illness is different from mental health. And that all of us, need to manage our mental health, because we all have it. And health and wellness is so important in all aspects, mind, body, and soul, as he said. So decreasing the stigma around understanding things, around getting help, and the long-term mental health facility, I think, is the other part to mention from that as well. The need to be able to provide individuals with the services here if we can. To keep them close, keep them connected with the family. Social support is the biggest protective factor for mental health. So if we can keep them here and keep them connected, all the better. Alex Panton Foundation's working on more services for the adolescents as well. So we actually have a lot of mental health providers outpatient in Cayman. Not a lot of the other levels of care that are needed here.
We're working on it.
We are.
It's a work in progress.
We're working on it.
Like I said earlier.
The free counseling services, if I may, they are busy, as you alluded to, but it's 949-8789. That's the counseling center. And you can give them a call, and they'll let you know when you can come in for an appointment. And anytime there's concerns about suicide or an emergency, 911 or the hospital at Georgetown Hospital, A&E. Is the service to go to for that.
Absolutely. And like I said at the start of the show, there's so much to cover within this topic that is very worthy of a three-part.
we just scratched the surface.
Absolutely.
We got to do this again.
We'll have to do another show in the future.
The articles that you and I were referring to will be on drbodden.com.
Okay.
So,
Thank you so
if
much.
anyone's interested in that, then I'll put them up there.
drbodden.com. And what is the counseling center's phone number one more time?
949-8789.
8789. 949-8789.
Right.
Dr. Giselle, I thank you so much for your patience on the line. I'm sorry we couldn't get to you too much in this conversation, but we'll have you in studio in the near future.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On that note, we got to go to our 1:30 commercial break. When we come back, we'll be sitting down with Mr. Andre Bailey from the Family Resource Center. We'll be back with more talk today right after this.
Poppy Show! 2 competitions for the price of 1 at the Hartwell Theater November 7th. Enjoy the dazzling District Heritage Ambassador Costume Spectacular and the National Song Competition. Tickets at eventpro.ky are $20 premium seating, $10 general admission, and $5 under 12s. Show them who is the Poppy Show on 7th November at the Hartwell Theater. Gates open at 6:30 p.m. For more details on how to enter, please email events@piratesweekfestival.com. Sponsored by Cayman Distributors Group
and Radio Cayman.
For the record.
For information that matters to you, the people. Hear from the government, the opposition, independents, and other experts on issues and solutions that affect you.
For the record.
Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, tune into 89.9 and 93.9 FM from 7:30 to 9 a.m. for Cayman's News Straight Talk Morning Show. For the record.
I invite you to join me for the record. You are invited to be a part of this interesting and informative show. Embrace the opportunity to dialogue with your legislators, policymakers, and those charged with policy implementation.
For the record.
Brought to you by
Coca-Cola, available across the Cayman Islands from Tortuga Distributors.
Accept no substitutes. Taste the feeling with Coca-Cola.
The Ministry of Tourism's Displaced Tourism Employee Stipend Program has reopened for registration from Monday 2nd November through Wednesday 4th November. This 4th registration period is for new registrants only, and all information must be supplied via the online portal stipend.ourcayman.ky by the deadline 4th November. Email stipend@caymanislands.ky with any questions.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Your Radio Cayman 6 p.m. news, Monday through Friday, is brought to you by Logic. Your life connected.
That thing we've been saying for 64 years, ignore it. Eat the KFC wings, drink the KFC gravy, fill up on fries. Just please forget the thing we normally suggest. You know, that thing you used to do with your tongue after finishing a delicious piece of our KFC chicken. We get it. It's not easy. There's a reason why it's been our slogan for over half a century. But the world's drastically changed of late, and as soon as we can embrace the change, the sooner we can all get back to doing what we do best. KFC. It's good.
Honey, our fridge has stopped working again. Everything in the freezer is melting. We need to get this repaired right away. I'm calling Brand Source Service.
When you need the very best appliance service, call Brand Source Service at 623-5000. Offering service and installation of all brands and models of appliances. Brand Source Service is Cayman's source for appliance parts and repairs, with qualified and experienced technicians and the island's largest stock of appliance parts. Brand Source Service will have your repair completed in a flash. So, whatever the problem is, call the experts at 623-5000. Brand Source Service, Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park. Telephone 623-5000.
89.9 Radio Cayman helps you to weather the storm during this hurricane season.
One of the most crucial elements of hurricane preparedness is storm awareness. During the season, it is of utmost importance to pay attention to the latest local weather forecast, as hurricanes do not suddenly form or strike. There are various methods of advanced notification. Utilizing such may be the difference between a favorable outcome and disaster. Both television and radio serve as excellent mediums with up-to-the-minute storm path information in the wake of a hurricane. Another method of tracking a hurricane may be only arm's length away. Your smartphone or tablet can be your most valuable tool before, during, and after a storm, providing countless numbers of apps with crucial hurricane information. Many apps allow you to track storms with moving radar and satellite imagery, plus offer alerts, current conditions, forecasts, advisories, and even video.
This hurricane preparedness tip was brought to you by your community radio station, Radio Cayman 89.9 FM.
Do you remember when 2020 was great?
I don't think it was
2020 vision, not the year.
right.
Make 2020 great again with Optical Outlook, the new West Bay store now open. With their designer frames and sunglasses, eye health has never looked so good. Call 746-2020 and book your eye exam today at Caymanian Village and now at Jake Scott Plaza in West Bay, offering premier eye care in Cayman for over 30 years. Come see the difference with Optical Outlook.
Oh, Cayman moon.
The voice of the Cayman Islands, Radio Cayman.
Shining down from above.
We love our listeners.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. And now pleased to have in studio again, rejoining us from about a month ago, Mr. Andre Bailey from the Family Resource Center. Was it about a month ago you were on the show? Time flies, so my perspective on time is all...
Time does fly.
It's November.
It's November now.
It's
so
November
I was here
right
in
now.
October. So it's been probably 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Time flies. Let me tell you, it's... oh, yes, right. You were here in studio with Sterling.
Yes.
And then we had you in studio when I was hosting. We were talking about your family parenting programs.
Right. That's correct.
And how are those programs going?
They're going well. We have a few programs that are wrapping up towards the end of this month.
Oh, they are? Okay.
We actually started a new program, and this is with the what was the Boddentown Primary School. It's a 4-week parenting workshop.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and that's completely virtual. So we are online with that workshop. It's weekly, and we had a first session last week, and that was very well. So
nice.
We're hoping to expand that to other schools who would like that sort of support for us to do those virtual or in-person presentations within our schools. We call this particular workshop with that school, it's called Positive Parenting. Okay. So it's a mixture of the Positive Discipline course, is a mixture of our SNAP program, as well as our regular parent coaching sessions that we'd have at the Family Resource Center.
Positive Parenting. That's at the bottom town. That's a virtual class.
It's a virtual class.
And how's it? How's the attendance virtually coming along?
Well, we were promised 8 families, and they all showed up.
Okay.
And then the interaction was good in terms of, because it's done in a Zoom meeting format, so families are able to speak wherever they are, come in and speak, and they're also able to use the chat option to, we make it interactive. So they're able to speak, and they're able to type in the chat, ask questions, raise their hands, and we'll address them as best as possible to make it as interactive as possible in a virtual way.
Are the kids involved, or is it strictly for parents?
For parents, strictly for parents. So the school would have identified some parents who needed the support, and they approached us at the Family Resource Center, and then we worked together based on their needs to formulate this particular workshop for that school.
And is there any kind of feedback loop where you're getting any feedback from these parents on how they're finding the program?
Well, it's only been a week, but at the day after, we got an email from the counselor, the school counselor, who said that they thoroughly enjoyed the first session, and that they're looking forward to the weeks to come, and that the parents themselves had given feedback about gaining something from that 1 week.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
and that's what you like. That's the tangible results that you want. Someone's actually saying, hey, it's working.
This was good.
It's not just the talk. There's actually a results of being generated. A parent that's showing they're finding value in that means that value is going to translate down to, theoretically, to their child, and then expand outward for their child, and so on. That's the goal, right?
Exactly so.
That's the utopian thought process. But that's great. That's great. And then, are we going to see these classes? I know we're here to talk about IMD, but since we're on is it going to be a scenario you're going to see these classes more often become virtual?
Well, this one in particular is virtual because of the current restrictions and the concerns. So we find that there is value in the in-person sessions. So we try to replicate that as best as possible on the virtual platform to make it as interactive as possible. So if it is that we are given the opportunity to do in person, then providing it's allowed, we will do the in-person sessions for the value aspect of it. Not that you miss much on the virtual platform, but being in a group setting, that in itself has value. And the truth is, on a virtual platform, persons get distracted at home because they're at home, they have kids, they have their spouses, something might happen, there's a pot on the stove, they're trying to cook. We recognize that within your home space, it might not be the most conducive place for learning, especially since it's your home. Like, it's not a place of learning. It's where you go to relax. It's where you go to unwind. Yeah, this is home, your comfort zone.
Even in this day and age, you think so? In 2020, when everyone was home for so long, is that really a place to relax anymore?
I mean, it's changing. Yes, it's changing, but I don't think we've gone to the point where everybody and people learn differently too.
Sure, absolutely correct. Yeah.
Some persons are really tactile, and they prefer that in-class, in-person learning. Yes. So we want to accommodate and facilitate that as best as possible.
I'm the complete opposite. Give me that home life absolutely any day of the week. I will learn. I'll absorb it all. I'll pass all those tests with flying colors. Tactile environment, I will fall asleep at my desk.
So and that's good. We have found too that since the lockdown earlier this year, that we have had a lot of uptake in virtual attendance. Great. So we're even able to run a virtual class for the BRAC. It's a positive discipline class for clients in Cayman BRAC, and we just wrapped that program up last week. It was the final week. And then there was a family skills session that was also done for the BRAC, and that was done virtually. So we are able to reach more than we would in person. and we have definitely taken the technology and using it to our advantage at this point.
Was there any kind of feedback loop from the BRAC families? How they found the course?
Well, we got feedback from the social worker, I can remember, because I didn't do that one specifically, but I remember the report, and the social worker had reported that the families were very receptive of that class, and that they would want to do that sort of modality moving forward again, if possible.
That's great. That's the kind of direction you want to see the programs work, right? You can measure the results, you can see how effective they are. Now, are we going to see, if people have... touch on this again later. If any families listening right now have more questions about those parenting classes, how can they get in touch to find out? Please just contact the Family Resource Center. You can contact us by phone. It's 949-0006. So that's 949-0006. Send us an email, frc@gov.ky, or visit our website, frc.gov.ky, and fill out one of our workshop forms, submit that, and then an officer will contact you to get you signed up for one of the programs that's on upcoming or ongoing. That's great. So contact us by email. You could even follow us on our social media platforms at FRC Cayman, and on Facebook you could find us at Family Resource Center. So contact us wherever way you can, and we will get you situated. We have waiting lists for programs that are to come, and for programs that are already started, if there is enough space, or depending on how far that program is, you could join an ongoing program, or you could visit the offices, whichever works for you. That's fantastic. Glad to hear the programs are taking such an uptick throughout the community. That's fantastic. Definitely. Now off to International Men's Day. It's coming up November 19th? 19th. All right. It's November 19th every year, correct? It's November 19th every year. That's correct. All right. So this is not the first time we've had the segment talking about International Men's Day on the show, but for those listeners that may not be aware, what is International Men's Day? Where did it come from? What's it all about? Well, I was the first time they had International Men's Day was in 1999, actually. And we are celebrating the 9th year here in the Cayman Islands. So in 1999, they had the International Day through regional and global coordinators to develop a global dialogue on creating and nurturing an empowering world for men and for boys, right? So they wanted to create and support initiatives which improve the manner in which the world addresses and resolves the unique mental and physical health issues, and improve their access to essential tools needed for real-life options to empower and strengthen all communities. So we're looking at men within these communities, men and boys within these communities, and how, as a global community, we can facilitate an empowerment and to support them in that way. Okay. Looking at boys and men. Boys and men. And then with regards to natural history, this is actually the International Men's Day movement actually started in the Caribbean, globally. It was in Trinidad and Tobago. It was in Trinidad and Tobago, that's correct. So it actually is like it has Caribbean roots, right? Well, that's good. That's good, right? It is, because you hear so often about the absenteeism of fathers and in the communities in the Caribbean, and how the fathers weren't always involved. But we see a movement like this, an international one that started within the Caribbean itself. Started within the Caribbean, and it started, if I remember correctly, at UE. Was where it actually had started. It was a professor at UE that recognized the need for recognizing. And but in fact, the UE has always been doing those type of studies in relation to Caribbean men. Yeah. I mean, women too, and Caribbean families overall. But as the regional university, then university itself has always been doing those studies, which of course we come to enjoy in the Caribbean, and have the literature to support our Caribbean realities as men too. No, absolutely. And then, so now if I remember correctly, there's themes every year for International Men's Day. That's correct. What is this year? What was last year's theme? Do you remember? I don't recall last year's themes. Oh, I can't recall. The years just blended, right? So everything's just kind of blended. This year the theme is healthy minds and bodies. Healthy minds and bodies, okay. Right. And this is, of course, coming from this COVID era that we're in. So with the world as it is wants to encourage institution, organization, and individuals to work towards creating the best environment for healthy souls in the nation. And of course, it involves the physical
but of course it involves the spiritual, the emotional, and the psychological health as well. So from that mindset of the world going through the COVID crisis, and the post-COVID, moving into a post-COVID era, speaking it into being.
You're speaking it into being, I like
that's
that.
Right.
All right.
So the International Men, the organization itself, wanted to promote healthy minds and bodies. So for 2020, that's the theme that we're observing: healthy minds and bodies.
Healthy minds and bodies. And how are we? I guess what are the activities that we're doing this year to help reinforce this concept of healthy minds and bodies?
All right. Well, at the Family Resource Center, we spearhead that campaign. Of course, we encourage the community to get involved wholeheartedly, private and the public sector itself, to be a part of the conversation having to deal with International Men's Day. But for us at the Family Resource Center, one of our flagship events is the basketball competition. It started last year, and this year we're having the second annual, that's a 3-on-3 basketball competition. Last year it was held at the John Gray, but this year it will be at the Ark in Cayman Bay. And it's a free event. We invite men to sign up and boys to sign up for it. It's online registration is free, and on-site registration is also free. And there is a division for everyone. So there's a junior division and there's a senior division. This will happen on the 22nd of November. It's a Sunday, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. again at the Ark in Cayman Bay. So we use that activity, and we're particularly happy this year that we have started a competition like this, given the theme being healthy minds and bodies, because the physicality of the basketball competition really falls squarely within the theme for 2020. So that's on the 22nd of November.
Okay. So and what ages does that cater to?
All age. We are there to all ages. There's an under 12 competition. So there will be an under 12 competition. So all children could be a part of that. Boy children, of course. And then there is the men division, which would facilitate 13 and above.
Okay.
So everyone's invited. Everyone could participate. There is a division for all classes.
Okay. And then, so that's November 22nd. I do believe we have one caller on the line. Are we trying to determine the caller's still on the line? Yep. Let's take our one caller here. Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling Talk Today.
Yes, I'm a mother, but I just wanted to say something, because I always try to encourage young men, because there are so many men out there, Latino men and men of color, that are abandon their children, and they get into so much trouble. So when I see what I see, we have to encourage the young men. When I see them with their babies, I go up to them and I put up my finger to them to show them that I appreciate what they are doing and bless them. Because sometimes we really put down men, right? But sometimes we have to really encourage them, because if we keep putting them down, they're not going to do anything. Some of them, oh, I have 11 baby mother. I say, what the hell are you going to tell Jesus when he comes? Oh, I take care of them. I say, where is the flesh and blood? So we have to try and encourage and tell other people that we must encourage the young men them that is coming up, so they don't go the same road like those older ones. Thank you.
Caller, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate that. Thank you. Very valuable caller, and she's actually got a great point that she's just referenced there about encouraging. That's the whole purpose of behind IMD, is
the
encouraging.
whole purpose behind and the thing is, it says International Men's Day, but we are really trying to expand that for a whole month-long set of activities. Awesome. I mean, we don't want to limit it to a day. So that's why we're trying as best as possible each year to grow and to develop and to expand. This year, on International Men's Day, that's on the 19th, we are having a Dress for a Cause. So we're inviting companies, organizations to purchase shirts from us at the Family Resource Center and to organize a Dress for a Cause day, where all the proceeds from that, of course, goes towards programming, especially related to men, development of men and boys, similar to what the caller said, that we have so many times in our society, and it's societal in nature, that men sometimes get a bad rep. So we want
sometimes.
Yes.
Can I elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, Raymond. Sometimes, men. Sometimes, and I mean, I'll be very political correct about it. That is sometimes get a bad rep, and we want to change that sort of conversation within our community.
Absolutely.
And so the Dress for Our Cause Day on the 19th goes towards programs for men. We have in January coming up, because we have started our calendar, putting together our calendar for 2021. And early January, we want to launch our Fathers First program. Well, do another installment, another cohort of Fathers First, where it targets specifically fathers and how to encourage fathers, empower them in terms of raising children and childcare overall in general, family relationships, and so on. So we will definitely be using those funds raised from the Dress for Our Cause to facilitate that type of program. For this,
and that's in January.
That's in January. But for this year, in this month, November, we have put together a program for boys within our schools, and we have called it Raising Resilient Boys. So these are workshops that we are going to be having. Of course, we are approaching the schools for parents, but whatever organization would want us to be a part of that, feel free to contact us. Submit from our website a presentation request form, or you could contact us by email, and we'll facilitate as best as possible. And the name of that workshop is Raising Resilient Boys. And this is for parents with boys, and we want to give them tips and strategies on how to go about ensuring, like our caller said, that boys within our society don't necessarily go into a path that is negative. We are definitely want to promote positive role models. Part of the objectives of International Men's Day is to promote positive role models. So we're not looking at movie stars, and we're not looking at athletes who are big in the media. Of course, those are positive too. But we want to promote everyday men, working class men who are working an honest living, and they're setting that example for their children. So we know and we have recognized that it is important for that to start within the home. And the more resilient our boys are, then the want of a better word, better they will be as men.
Yeah, of course.
So definitely we want to have this workshop available for our community, Raising Resilient Boys.
Okay. So we have was there any more there before I try to recap some of these?
Right. We have at the Family Resource Center a film that was done. That's Men's Voice. It's a film that was used last year, but we're inviting especially the private sector and any organization, NGOs, community groups, service organization, churches. It's a film on role model men within the Cayman Islands, and we're inviting persons to organize a screening, a private screening. Contact us at the Family Resource Center. We'll send that to you. And if you could organize a screening within your organization, then this documentary can be showed on that as a platform in that space for persons to see exactly what's going on, to understand the messaging behind it. So it's a locally produced documentary that's focused on highlighting positive male role models and discussing the issues and challenges men face. And if persons, communities, organizations can organize a screening event for that, even to do some fundraising for the Family Resource Center, or just to have the conversation going, then we're definitely promoting that screening and asking persons to participate by organizing these screening events within their own space.
And so that video was made last year, locally made.
It's a locally produced documentary. And
who produced that video?
Pardon?
Who produced the video? Oh, actually, you know what? We'll come back to that question in just a moment. We have to go to our 2 p.m. headline news. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have here on the island.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
Lawmakers are closing out the agenda of the current sitting today, and it will be the last time the House will sit as the Legislative Assembly. The next time they meet, there will be members of Parliament as provided for in an amendment to the Constitution Order 2020, which will have been approved by the Privy Council by then. Make sure to listen to today's proceedings live on our sister station, 105.3 Breeze FM. Officials have covered up a noose on display near polling booths in Missouri after local Democrats argued it could imitate black voters. The incident is one of a number of controversial occurrences in the final days of the U.S. election campaign. Meanwhile, a Democratic campaign bus in Texas was encircled by supporters of President Donald Trump, a Republican, and a rally to promote voting in North Carolina ended with attendants getting pepper sprayed and arrested. And at least 2 people have been stabbed to death in the Canadian city of Quebec as a man armed with a sword and dressed in medieval clothing attacked them. 5 others were wounded in the Halloween night attack. A man in his mid-20s was arrested shortly thereafter. Police said an initial probe found the suspect was not affiliated with any extremist groups. The attack took place at a historic Old Quebec neighborhood. Those are your headlines. I'm Carsley Fuller.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
Stronger, wider, higher, lighter. The all-new Ford Ranger Raptor.
Powerfully built with a 2.0 diesel Panther engine and 210 horsepower. Modern with leather interior, an 8-inch touchscreen, Sync 3 technology, and power features. Tough. Built to handle the off-road with 4-wheel drive, terrain modes, and a 10-speed automatic transmission. Coming early October to Vamped Motors, Walkers Road. To find out more and to test drive the bold new Ford Ranger Raptor, visit Vamped Motors, Walkers Road, or call 949-8288.
What a great spot for lunch. I haven't been here in ages.
I saw it on Experience Cayman.
What's that?
It's a free online festival showcasing all the great things to do in Cayman.
Oh, that's so cool. I'll check it out for sure. Now, what are we having for lunch?
Experience Cayman is a celebration of everything local to rediscover all the best things to see and do in the Cayman Islands. Visit gov.ky/Experience Cayman and follow Experience Cayman on Facebook and Instagram. Brought to you by the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in following our 2 p.m. headline news, I'm Raymond Singh filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. We do hope he's enjoying his well-deserved time away from the office. And we're pleased to have in studio again from the Family Resource Center, Mr. Andre Bailey here to discuss International Men's Day. A couple activities on the agenda for November. And as a man myself and a father in the community, very happy to see some of the events the evolution of International Men's Day here in Cayman, going from just a one-day kind of event we talk about what was happening internationally to now seeing more tangible events here on island. You mentioned the 3v3 basketball tournament, which was launched last year.
Yes.
For some reason, I thought it was 2 years ago that it was launched, but great. So last year was the first year that it was done at John Gray.
Right.
Okay. And how did it work out last year? Or were you involved with it?
No, I wasn't involved in it last year, no.
All right, so then we have the 3v3, and we have an under-12 division, and then we have a
senior division.
Senior division.
Right.
Now, so that is am I correct in understanding that for 13 or 14-year-olds, they may be playing with the senior men?
It's a requirement, actually. So part of that competition is that there must be a junior on the team at all times. On the court at all times.
Okay.
So the 13 to 17-year-old must be on each team and must be on the court. Each team has a maximum of 5 players, but the junior player must be on the court at all times. Because what this particular basketball competition is the getting both men and boys involved at the same time. So while it's competitive and while there's $1,000 cash prize for the winning team, it is
senior team.
The senior team, right. Yeah. The junior team will be awarded too with medals and gift certificates. And certificates of participation.
Sure.
But for the senior team, there's a cash prize of $1,000, even though it's a free event. So the idea behind it is, of course, to have men and boys playing together. So it's not a competition where it's just a senior league only. It's having those juniors playing with the seniors at the same time to have that transference of men and boys within that space working together as part of celebration of International Men's Day.
Okay. And so the goal, just to make sure I wrap my head around because we have the healthy minds and bodies is the theme for this year's Men's Day event, and 3v3 looks like will become a staple event as part of the International Men's Day festivities.
As a matter of fact, we were talking about that, and it used to be football. Because let's say this is the 9th year that we're celebrating International Men's Day on the island. So it used to be football that happened before. Then last year it got switched to basketball. So we don't know, or we're not sure how long basketball will run, but we were discussing the possibilities of other sports. I know Cayman Islands is also big on volleyball. So we were thinking about how feasible it would be to involve volleyball at a later year. But we'll see how that goes, and it depends too on the demand, and it depends too on what our men really are interested in.
Sure. Perhaps even the 5K races.
Even a 5K race.
I know the FRC does a few of those a year.
We
right?
do the 5K, the Color Me Purple. That's in honor of Women's Month. That's in March.
Sure.
So it could happen for the men too, or we could keep it something separate.
Absolutely. And we start talking, and just because I'm asking, we do have a number of listeners who are more seasoned. Are we going to see any events like these on the Healthy Minds and Bodies for our older men, the over 40 group, or the 40 to 80 group? And because fitness and health changes as we get older. So when we look at the under 12 and under or young adults basketball program, that obviously caters to a younger demographic. When we talk about men's health, we're talking about overarching age brackets here. Are we going to eventually see some more evolution of events towards that age bracket?
In discussions for this year's International Men's Day month, if that's a
International
term,
Men's Day
International Men's Day month,
Perfect.
Right? We recognize that Senior Month just ended. While the DCFS spearheads Senior Month and the celebration surrounding them.
Sure.
So in our discussions, we have spoken about collaborating with DCFS.
Oh, great. Okay.
I mean, we haven't necessarily approached them yet, but internally at FRC, how we would go about approaching DCFS to extend those observations into November to give special credence to our senior men.
Sure.
This year, given the concerns regarding seniors, we have foregone direct activities per se in terms of gathering our seniors together, because we understand the delicate nature of that population in this pandemic situation. So not so much for this year, but definitely for 2021 we are looking at, and of course again we are speaking it into being that we'll be in a better place. We're looking at introducing more activities for seniors, as well as collaborating on that front with our sister agency.
That's fantastic. So Healthy Minds and Bodies, that's 3v3 November 22nd.
22nd, that's correct.
A Saturday or Sunday?
It's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday.
Sunday,
and
November
what time
22nd. It's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And again, it's at the Ark in Cayman Bay.
At the Ark in Cayman Bay.
So register online on our website. The registration form is there, frc.gov.ky, or you could email us, or you could register on site. As well. Each participant will be given a shirt to play in. It's our International Men's Day shirt. And there will be also fun free throw competition. There will be a minute to win a competition. So, and live entertainment. So within the basketball game itself, we will have, or during the day of activities, we will have those novelty activities, the three-throw competition and the minute to win competition. And of course, we're organizing live entertainment for our fathers and patrons who will be in attendance. So while it's a Men's Day event, we're inviting the entire community to be out. Sure. Of course, we know the mothers will be there to support their boys who are playing or support their sons and their husbands who are playing. And we encourage the entire community as best as possible to come out and to support these players. Absolutely. And to be a part of that event.
Thank you for that. Just in case you are just tuning in, we are on with Mr. Andre Bailey from the International. Mr. Andre, what is your formal title at the FRC?
I'm a program facilitator.
Program facilitator at the Family Resource Center. If you do have any questions or would like to join our conversation, simply dial 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037. Or you can always send us a WhatsApp at 925-3261. Again, we're discussing the International Men's Day month.
International, yes, we've officially adopted it.
You
and I,
you did it. I supported it.
Yes,
I
International Men's Day month. So International Men's Day is observed on the 19th, but here we are expanding it into a month of activities, a month of celebration and observances.
Absolutely.
And we're inviting the community to be a part of that. One way the community can do that is to engage us online with our Picture This competition. So what that is that we're asking persons to snap a photograph of a man, everyday man, doing his regular activities. It could be something that he does every day. It could be a traditional task that a man does. It could be something that is non-traditional, something like combing his daughter's hair, whatever it is. Take a picture, caption that picture, post it, and tag the Family Resource Center. And each entry, as you tag them, we'll see them. And of course, the photograph that gets the most like at the end of the month will be awarded by the Family Resource Center and our sponsors. Just some social media engagement for our community. So it's our Picture This competition. And we want persons to be a part of that conversation and to be a part of that engagement by taking a photograph of men within the community, posting it, tagging it, and tagging the Family Resource Center.
That's great. So picture competition coming out, information coming out soon on that. We do have one caller on the line. Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling Talk Today.
That would be me?
Yes, you. Good afternoon, caller.
Yeah. Thank you for accepting my call. I don't know what this is all about. Like, you're trying to get young men or men in general, and I heard him talking about nutrition and all of that. But I think that we have like when you put a stop on a bottle and it gets kind of cross-shaded, not fitting properly. I think the nutrition thing that he was talking about a while ago, nutrition, health of bodies, health of minds. If we spray in everything that we grow, like I went to a farmer the other day and he said, well, my cows is they look good, right? I said, yeah, what are you feeding them? He said, well, I'm feeding them American food and a little bit of grass. And I'm saying, well, do you think that is a Cayman beef then? If you're feeding it with American food? So nutrition is based on organics. If we keep on using all these chemicals in our food, even in Cayman now, as a profit, so because we want to sell our produce, so we start spraying them with all kind of chemicals to keep the bugs away and all that. I don't think that healthy anymore.
Caller, I do appreciate the call on that. That was a bit of a segue into our previous call. I'm going to let you go here now, and I'll address your point in just a moment. Thank you so much for calling in. To address the caller's point, this segment now is about the International Men's Day. There's a bit of a commentary in the previous segment in regards to mental health issues and with regards to and eating proper nutrition. So I do appreciate the caller calling in. And with that point, nutrition is a major part of overall health. And with this year's topic being healthy minds and bodies for men, there's definitely a segue there for nutrition coming into this conversation.
Right. Well, if we're talking about healthy bodies, it of course involves what we eat and we put into our bodies. So I do understand what he's saying in terms of, using these chemicals to spray our food and to have them as best as possible. Persons are encouraged to eat healthy. Persons are encouraged to think about what they're consuming, and in so doing to promote healthy living and healthy bodies. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, caller. If I could touch on that just a little bit, many of our listeners will know that I have a vested interest in the topic of men's health and men's welfare with regard to boys, men, and fathers. And the caller has a great point when we start talking about the chemicals in food, even what the quality of the foods that we're eating are, and the effects on men's health. Will there be any, perhaps, whether this year or even in the future, when you start talking about the fathers first and raising resilient boys, on the impact of nutrition with those? When you start talking about soy in food and how soy affects the male body differently than it affects the female body, can linings, BPA plastics. We start talking about all those different elements and how they grossly reduce testosterone levels in men. It'd be great to see that level of dialogue in the future within the various spheres of the conversation. On that note, let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be exploring more about International Men's Day.
Introducing the new Digicel Prime bundles, better than anything we've offered before, with more data than ever, more music on the music, more live sports on Sportsmax, more movies on Playgo, more video chats on BIP. With the new Digicel Prime bundles, it's never been easier to get more digital experiences, plus extra data. Get 50 gigabytes with a 7-day bundle. So much data, so much fun. Buy in My Digicel app today. The Caribbean's fastest mobile network. Digicel, better together.
Radio Cayman News.
The defense bill was the topic of much debate in the Legislative
Bill
Assembly.
provides for the governance and management of the newly established regiment.
How we are calling it the Cayman Regiment without the involvement of the Caymanian people.
The regiment represents an opportunity to continue evolving.
Proud of them for coming forward to serve their country.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice for today's biggest news.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. Are you currently a member and interested in management of your pension plan? If so, consider volunteering to be elected as a trustee at our upcoming extraordinary general meeting to be held on the 4th of November. Please visit our website, chamberpension.ky, or email pensions@chamberpension.ky for further details. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in for the tail end of our show, we're pleased to have in studio Mr. Andre Bailey from the Family Resource Center here to discuss International Men's Day, slated for November 19th. However, he has affectionately now dubbed November International Men's Day Month, which I'm pleased to say that the term has now been coined right here on Radio Cayman.
Of course.
So while
it's the voice of the nation, right?
It is. While International Men's Day might be a global phenomenon, it was started in the Caribbean. It was started in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And now we'll see International Men's Day Month emanating from Cayman, courtesy of Mr. Andre Bailey.
All right.
Pushed your way out there.
I mean, we are happy to expand the offerings during the month.
Sure.
Of course, men play a vital part of our society.
Absolutely.
And we have far too long failed to honor some of the things that are done by men within the society. And of course, this year, International Men's Day, Healthy Minds and Bodies, we are really trying to promote that and to acknowledge and validate things that are done by men within our society, which are positive to the building of our nation.
That's great. And I think I speak for half the population of Cayman when I say thank you. Like, it's great to see that level of, I jokingly said before that we tend to throw men on the bus quite often. Man makes mistakes. It's very quick to point out a man's mistakes.
Yes.
When he makes mistakes, we're very slow on the encouragement side and on the empowerment side. As the first caller said, when she was talking about young fathers, and when she sees the young fathers, to go over to them, to make that initiative to actually offer those few words of encouragement.
Right, and
because they're
acknowledge it.
breaking the cycle. They're breaking a
Of
cycle
course.
that's been generational throughout much of the Caribbean, throughout much of the world. But
Throughout much of the
you
world,
see
and
it
especially
very-
within our Caribbean reality, of course.
Absolutely. You
And
see-
I mean, we cannot deny it that it is so. We've seen it; it's
Absolutely.
pervasive. It's
It
there.
is, it is.
So we have to make that effort to acknowledge and validate the positive actions of men within our society, and of course, celebrate them as much as we can.
Absolutely. So we have the father. So we have the November 19th, a dress for a cause. Now, to how do you coordinate the dress for a cause? Do people just come to FRC to buy shirts, or how is that done?
Well, they could contact us to organize shirts. Yes, we'll also be sending out to some persons or some places to encourage them to participate, but we're encouraging businesses, private sector, public sector, NGOs, community groups, churches, whoever it is in our community to purchase shirts from us as part of that fundraising effort for programming towards men initiatives.
Okay.
And organize that just for our cause. Some places they actually collect some money or they may do something else to get some additional funds, which are then donated to the Family Resource Center, and we appreciate it very much. On that note, we'd want to pause to acknowledge Davenport, which is a sponsor for the International Men's Day activities. So shout out to Davenport Developments here in the Cayman Islands, who are a sponsor of ours for 2020. I mean, they have been so before, but acknowledging and recognizing 2020 that Davenport have come on board to sponsor us for International Men's Day activities this year.
That's fantastic. So that's a big shout out to Davenport again for that. So the funds again will go to support the FRC programs, including the Father's First program, slated for next year.
Slated for January 2021.
For and walk us through again what is entailed within the Father's First. I appreciate that it's not fully ready yet, but what is involved?
No, but we have done it before.
Oh, okay, you have.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Father's
my
First is something that we have done before. It's just that we're having a new...
the new cycle.
Yeah, a new installment, a new cohort of men.
Sure.
So the Father's First program is one that we meet with the men. Of course, Fathers First. It is geared towards fathers and created for them, and it goes through self-awareness for fatherhood. It goes through the roles that fathers play at each developmental level of children in relation to their partners as well. It goes through the importance of the resilience within the father-son relationship, within the father-daughter relationship, childcare, spousal relationship. Who is a father? Who am I? So there's a lot of introspection and self-awareness that goes into it. Of course, it teaches parenting tips. It teaches emotional coaching. It teaches all those parenting aspects that usually are taught to mothers. It's now done to fathers within the Fathers First program, allowing them to more so recognize that above all things they are a father first, and then in doing that and in recognizing their role and responsibility as a father for a change in behavior in terms of parenting, doing so positively. Not that fathers haven't been doing so, but like we have discussed, within our Caribbean reality, we haven't as men learned how to be fathers because we didn't all have positive fathers growing up. And if we're supposed to be real about the conversation, some of us never had fathers growing up. So we didn't learn how to be a son to a father, and in turn how to be a father to a son or a daughter. So the Fathers First program helps our fathers in recognizing what those roles are and who am I in relation to my children and how to go about positively parenting my children for a development for generations to come. Their children and their children's children.
Such important because you're actually breaking that generational cycle. We talk about the social ills of society.
Right.
So many of them. When I say so many, I mean the vast majority of the social dilemmas that are faced in society on a regular basis. Many of them actually stem back to absentee fatherism. When we start talking about young men and what their challenges are in life, and whether it's the gangs or the prisons or the education or the communication or suicide, so many of them stem back to have been traced back to broken family models or broken family strategies, however you want to phrase that. So when you start looking at the cost of prisons versus the cost of offering a Father's First program.
Exactly.
Like
there's so much into rehabilitation that's done.
Prevention.
And so much into...
Like you are saving... If you were to believe what I just said, if you have 5 dads in that program that have 5 sons, that's hopefully 5 fewer sons that risk taking that poor path.
Right, ending up in a penal system.
And end up in that system,
right.
Within the system, however that might be, or facing greater mental health challenges, or facing greater unemployment challenges, or propagating that cycle even further.
Right.
And the investment in that.
And then
huge.
that 5 multiplies to the next generation.
Multiplies and it expands and it expands.
Of course.
And so
definitely there's a ripple effect.
Yeah. And so this program that you're doing, the Father's First program, is such a pivotal program.
Yes.
You'd love to see that the initiative of the Dress for a Cause Day really help increase the funds to be able to open that program up
to our community.
To that many more, because that's that many more people that you're theoretically, and that's not just for boys in the prison system, that's also for girls and their empowerment. They've been shown, so many studies have been done to show that the broken family model creates this ripple effect for boys and girls, and to create
children.
These poor decisions as they grow up, because children like little monkeys. They monkey see, monkey do. And whatever they see mom and dad
children
do,
live what they learn.
They live what they learn.
And they in turn parent how they were parented.
Absolutely. And where there's a gap, they will fill that gap in older years by some other
influence,
influence, and rarely is that influence a very good influence.
So correct.
So that Father's First model is such an important one. And then you have Raising Resilient Boys. It's the other program.
It's a workshop. It's a workshop for the month of November that we will be doing within our community and within our schools. So if within your group you're listening today and you want us to be a part of that and you want to be a part of the conversation, please contact us at the Family Resource Center 949-0006, or contact us by email frc@gov.ky, or visit our website and complete one of the presentation or workshop forms. Submit that to us and we'll make contact with you.
And what is involved? Do you line kids up with paintball guns and shoot them so they're resilient? What is the actual? what is actually involved in the?
Well, it's for parents.
Okay, so
it's for parents.
It's a parenting class.
It's a parenting workshop.
Okay.
Especially for parents with boys.
Okay.
I mean, I figured there will be parents of girls who might want to attend.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a parenting workshop for parents of boys. The parents do have hard times at times.
Sure, absolutely.
Raising their boys. Especially when mothers are doing it alone, which is again part of our reality. So they do have a hard time at times raising boys. We understand the irreplaceable place of the father within the family unit and within the family structure. But in the absence of that, what it is that mothers can do to help to make their boys more resilient, and we definitely want to encourage parents to be a part of this workshop. It's a series of workshops. I mean, originally wanted to call it a school tour because we wanted to go into all the schools, but it might not be the most feasible thing at this time.
It'd be great
so we're
to
just
see
having those workshops open, and persons, families, parents can
such
be a part of it.
Element. That resilient, because I talk about that Father's First program being such an pivotal one. This next one, Raising Resilient Boys, is such an important program.
Of course.
And I think because the world is not a very forgiving place when we make mistakes, we get called out right away for it. And you need to have a little bit of grit and a little bit of resilience to kind of keep on going forward when everyone's kind of like push you back. It's just the reality of the coin, right?
It's the reality of it.
It is. And we have the roles model, which is still in the works, trying to put together the roles model program.
Roles model?
Role models, where you're trying to find men in the community to act
as. Oh, well, for the picture? Yes. I mean, overall, part of the objective of International Men's Day overall is to promote positive male role models.
My apologies. Yes, thank you.
Yes. So what we're trying to do with all our activities, however form they take, is to promote positive male role models within our society. And by that, I was saying earlier, it's not just the men who are high in society, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah, not just celebrities, not just big athletes. We're looking at everyday men who are setting an example for young boys and young girls and for the society itself. Doing an honest work, earning an honest living, setting that positive role model within the community. We want to acknowledge, recognize, and validate those men as part of the observance and the celebration of International Men's Day month.
Absolutely correct. The plumber that gets up at 5 a.m. to go to work to provide for his family,
every single morning.
He is your celebrity. He's your role model. Your coach who goes to school and saves one child from making that poor decision. that's who you're looking at as your role models. Those are the ones that are saving
Those are the ones
families
that are
and kids.
saving.
One child, one family at a time.
And the man who wakes up to drive the bus to take everybody to work.
Yeah, absolutely correct.
He is your role model.
Absolutely.
And he's there every morning to pick you up. So we want to highlight these everyday men within our society.
That's
and
fantastic.
ensure that they recognize their value within the society and the positive role model that they are.
Absolutely correct.
To the next generation.
And that's really good. Then just to recap again, you have the Men's Voice showings, which people can reach out to you to organize a showing at their place of employment, school.
Place of employment, school,
Absolutely.
church, home, community, wherever.
Absolutely,
yes,
Men's Voice.
definitely.
And then the picture competition, which is a social media like competition to whichever picture gets the most likes of a father doing awesome things. Or anybody.
No,
or just fathers.
Men.
Just men.
We don't
Any
want to say fathers because they are father figures and they are just men.
Absolutely.
Any male doing awesome things within the community.
Fantastic.
Something traditional, something non-traditional. Just doing something. Capturing a picture. Yeah. Tag the Family Resource Center. And most likes at the end of the month will, of course, receive an award from the Family Resource Center.
We appreciate all the work the FRC is doing in general, and then obviously for this month for International Men's Day.
Yes.
For our listeners at home again, how can they get in touch with you or the FRC, and what's all the information?
Okay, good. So our phone number is 949-0006. 949-0006. That's the phone number. Email us at frc@gov.ky or website frc.gov.ky. You could find us on Facebook at the Family Resource Center. You could follow us on Instagram. The handle is at FRC Cayman. And of course, you could visit our offices. We're at 87 Mary Street. That's Apollo House. We are on the second floor of the west wing of the Apollo House building.
That's fantastic. Andre, thank you so much for coming. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Raymond.
On that note, we do need to call it a wrap for today's show. Thank you again to all of our loyal listeners out there in Radio Cayman Nation, to Miss Susan Watson for keeping us in check, and our guests from Mental Health Matters and Mr. Andre Bailey from the Family Resource Center. It has been a pleasure bringing you talk today, and on behalf of the entire Radio Cayman family, thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. I'm Raymond Singh. God bless, and have a fantastic and enjoyable rest of your November.